Not as packed, Rick.
Yeah.
You got a smile, it's everything.
Again, welcome, and this is about anti-aging and how to activate that. It's what a big thing to say, like, how dare someone say you have anti-aging? But my goal is to be able to give you information today so that you know that your body is constantly in the process of changing. Many years ago in the mid-70s, Master Wong said to me, Richard, I said, Richard, moving river. I said, what are you talking about? He says, Richard, your body, moving river. I said, what do you mean moving river? He said, look at the river. Same river? I said, yeah, I'm looking at the river. He said, Richard, look at the river. Same river? I said, yeah. I was pretty slow, you know, some years ago. It's like, brain ain't getting it all. But what's the difference between the river that's here now and a second from now? Different water. So that's what he was trying to tell me, it's different water. That our body is composed of different cells, like that. And those cells are made up of something. So in my goal here is to talk to you about Western concepts that fall into the traditional Chinese training that I was involved in for 52 years. My work is on what's called the physical and metaphysical aspects of the human body. We're going to be learning today about stem cells, mechanotransduction, how cells are actually going through a life cycle, dying, and then having regeneration take place. And it's happening at a level you cannot believe. And I want this information to go to the public so you can understand clearly how it works and how it can benefit you with only doing small things every day. Okay? So the first place we want to start with is blood production. So the photo on your left here, that's someone from a child up to the age of 25. So blood is being produced in children and young adults in all of the bones in their body. But after the age of 25, something happens. And I'm going to tell you what the Chinese said 2,500 years ago and what we know today. So we know today that the blood production shifts from all of the bones to just these flat ones. So these flat bones are the key to have new blood production and new adult stem cell production. So we need to be able to put inward, downward pressure on those flat bones in order to accentuate and have literally new blood being formed. Okay? Now, how long does blood last? That was one of the things that my little teasers try to get you here. Anybody have any idea? 90 to 120 days. That's it. For a healthy adult. We have a lot of people here who might be over the age of 60.
Who's that?
Might be one or two. Your red blood cells aren't going to last even as long as that. So if they aren't lasting that long, where are they going and how are we making more of them? Okay? So, these red blood cells, we have 20 to 30 trillion of them that are made on a regular thing of the body. About 1/4 of the total number of human cells in your body are red blood cells. Okay? Process of making these cells, don't have to worry about the names of it, but typically somewhere between 90 or 100 to 120 days is the normal lifespan for any given red blood cell. Doesn't last any longer than that. So what happens after its life cycle is finished, it dies. Then it has to go through different organs of your body. So one of the big things in this that goes through your spleen. And as it goes through the spleen is going to actually, it changes its shape and its squeezes through the spleen. And the spleen has something that is lower, these Krebs cells and these villi cells that come upward. And it says, if you can't squeeze through here, we're going to get rid of you. And what it does is then the spleen then takes out the iron if it can, and then it passes the rest on to be eliminated through your body. So it tries to recycle it. So this process, 120 days maximum, is as how long any one stem cell is going to last. It's going to die, it's going to be a red blood cell, and it's going to have to be replaced. I'm telling you, it's being replaced in the bone marrow, particularly in these flat bones that we looked at earlier. White blood cells are also made in the bone marrow. So the white blood cells are the things that make your immune system work. White blood cells in that immune system, so we have different types of cells that are there. You have these granulites, the monocytes, and the lymphocytes. So these things are just keeping you healthy and doing particular functions. If I'm going to jump down to those macrophages here in the monocytes, they're here to get rid of old blood. And also, I'm going to talk about later, senescent cells, or cells that are literally not doing anything. They've died, they're not doing anything, they're hanging around like a, well, I guess. I guessed it might have stayed too long and they're not really producing or being part of your community. So there's a way to try to get rid of them. So we have these neutrophils that are there to get rid of bacteria and get rid of fungal infection. You have the basophils that are there trying to release the histamines that it needs to create immunoglobulins. There are different types of immunoglobulins, and I'm not going to bore you with that, but there's immunoglobulin 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they have different responses to a pathogen that's inside your body. Unfortunately, immunoglobulin or IgG4 response is a heightened immune response that actually creates cancers. And that's a bad thing that happens. But we're going to get into some of that in a few minutes. I don't want to overwhelm people, so I want to go over this production. So this big $1 million word, mechanotransduction. It's a process which cells sense and respond to mechanical forces. What does that mean, mechanical forces? Anybody have an idea what a mechanical force might be? Pressure, pushing down. So years ago we used to say weight-bearing exercises was the key. But now we've learned that it's not just weight-bearing, it's literally the physical pressure on the cells that is going to make those cells go through this process of converting it into a biochemical signal that's going to make that cell turn into something. Okay, mechanical transduction plays a role in the production of the red blood cells. I said the inward downward pressure on those flat bones is the key thing, not your long bones. We're going to get into some exercises that people do that actually is not really helping them very much because it's not activating the flat bone pressure. It's using the long bones. I'm not going to say which ones they are, but now we have to go about the erythropoietin, this right here. This is a hormone that actually looks for the quality of the blood that takes place when it flows through the kidney. So it looks and says, hey, has this thing got all the juice it needs in it? And if it doesn't, it sends a signal that travels through the blood that goes to the bone marrow and says, hey, we need more blood because what we got now is starting to age and it ain't going to work. So this is very important for the kidney function and what the kidney function does in order to secrete this particular hormone to get more red blood cells being created. It's mechanical forces that also regulates the shape and the deformability of the red blood cells, which are critical for the proper functioning and circulation. Remember, this blood's got to go in someplace. Your blood can, if you ever looked at blood or had your blood stuff taken here, like, I don't know, but she told me I had the best blood she ever saw. But I have a friend of mine who told me the other day, she had the worst blood she ever saw. And I know this friend, she's a dear friend of mine, actually had an incident here while she was shopping. Her blood was horrible because it is filled with things that you don't want in there. And even though my blood was fairly good, it did have some things in it like pardon? Heavy metals. So I grew up in the Rust Belt. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. So in Cleveland, Ohio, we have a lot of industry. We used to call it repulsive steel. That was named Republic Steel. There was a steel mill, and they would blast their stuff out, and we would breathe it. I said, we're one of the places where I can literally say, I watched a river burn. So 1968, the Cuyahoga River burned for 2.5 days. We went on the shores of it as teenagers. We drank beer and we looked and we said, my gosh, a river's burning. And they had these tugboats out there and they're spraying it with water. And water ain't doing any good to this oil-based fire that's there. But it was fun for us because as teenagers I got to say, I saw a river burn. Now, it's not something I'm proud of, but it did lead the whole movement for the country into the creating the EPA and having environmental regulations taking place. So we could start cleaning up that river so it doesn't continue to do things like that. But my body then brought that into my system. So now I have these heavy metals in my body. My body has to get one of these things to be able to go by, we talked earlier, that macrophage to go in there to take out that heavy metal. But it doesn't want to leave. It wants to cling and say, oh, I'm so needy. I'm so needy. I want to be by you, Chris. I'm so needy. So the needy parts are the horrible things that don't want to leave your body, and they're the ones we want to get to. Okay? Now, I was born, we were told this was impossible. What does that say? Heart cells grow throughout lifespan. Now, weren't you told that your heart cells, when you got them, that was it? And when they die, you're done? That they aren't replaced? Now, if I told you that if you had your finger lopped off, do you think you could grow it back?
Yes. There was a kid that grew back his leg because he saw a salamander do it, and he did it because.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to show some stuff here.
Yeah.
What about if you had we have all these teeth, what are they called? Permanent teeth? Right? If you lose a permanent tooth, what happens?
You get an implant.
You get an implant. It doesn't grow back, they tell you, right? I'm going to show you some things that you might not believe, but are true. What about cartilage in your knee? Or your shoulder?
Replacement.
Yeah, replacement, put something else in there. Will it regrow?
No, that's what they tell us.
That's what they tell you.
Depends on your age.
Now, nope.
I mean, that's
These
the
stem
whole-
cells are going to be produced regardless of your age. Depends on the creation of them and the circulation of them. But there's an industry that is motivated to, let's say, convince you of something else. Right? Now, I'm not going to talk about that industry, but you can. So these heart cells can grow. No joke, no pretending, no, this is fact. Now, we didn't know this up until 1988. So 1988 happened to be in Cleveland, Ohio. Mr. Kaplan, he's the one that proved that these stem cells exist. Made big headlines. I met him in the early 90s, and because of my work with him, I was able to, my meeting with him and his relationship to the Cleveland Clinic Hospital, I was able to show that if you did physical motion with individuals to create more of these stem cells, they can then increase healing after surgery. So for 15 years, I had my programs in the Cleveland Clinic for surgery rehabilitation. They wouldn't have done it if it didn't work.
Richard,
Yes.
recently Joe Dispenza had someone regrow a thyroid that had been surgically removed.
Yep.
And that's
So-
all with mental
So
meditation.
meditation helps. We're talking about that later. Hopefully I'll do something in a couple of weeks or maybe next month on psychoneural immunology. So that's the mind's effect on the physiological and neurological and immunological functions in the body. But today we're going to talk about physical things, about stem cells and how they work and how they function and how you create them and circulate them. Mechanotransduction is the key word. So you want to get in the back of your head, hey, I'm a mechanotransductor. It's a big, long word, but it means that the cell communication and the effective response comes from physical pressure on the body part. And the communication that takes place. There's technical things, but you don't have to worry about. This is for the biologists and folks. Yes?
Is massage basically a form?
Yes, we're going to get to that. Massage is exactly it. So that's how important massage is. We're going to go through what's called mechanotransduction therapies. So I'll give you a list of what they are and how they work. Now, your physical therapists don't even know about this. Some do, but most don't. Most of your doctors don't know about this for some reason. Or if they do, they're not telling you. Most of your massage therapists don't know about this. And I'll tell you about the difference in the pressures and the surfaces that the stem cell is on. I'll get to that in a minute. But I'll give you a hint. A lighter surface or a lighter massage affects a different part of your body. A medium massage or medium surface will affect a different part, and a deep one will affect even a third part. And we'll tell you exactly how literally things were grown based on the substrate that the stem cell is sitting on. Okay, this is the aging of the cycle of the growth and death of those cells. You make these new cells and how they're made, how they go through their life cycle. The excess cell death results in a net reduction in the number of myocytes. So as we get older, there's an imbalance that's taking place, not from age. Age and body age are two different things, or chronological age and body age are two different things. I could have a very weak 30-year-old that isn't even anywhere near the body age of a healthy 60-year-old. So it has nothing to do with your age. There's no chemical in your body saying, oh, I'm 60, I can't make the same thing. What you do have is more free radicals that are possibly in your body, or those things that I had in my body, the chemicals that I was exposed to. So the longer you're around, the more you have things that you have brought into your body you got to get rid of. But the process of how it regenerates is the same. And it doesn't get weaker. You think it gets weaker because they want you to believe that. It does not. And I'll show you why. Okay, we're going back to blood. Blood ranges, right now the blood inside you is somewhere between 38 to 60 days. This is taking an average person, it's about equivalent to 7% of your body weight is made up of blood. Remember, that blood is carrying the things that keep you alive, it's bringing oxygen to the cell, it's also bringing that adult stem cell. It's created in the bone marrow, particularly the flat bone marrow, the flat bones. The adult stem cells make the new blood. They carry the adult stem cell to the areas of the body for the regeneration. I mentioned this is like a flowing river. The more it flows, the cell you have now, like right now, we had blood cells die. All of us. But luckily, we got new cells growing that's going to replace that. How many of them? Depends on you. Depends on whether or not you have your functioning system. Here's how this thing works. So, a hematopoietic stem cell is for blood. So, trying to get your blood cell, and it gives rise to all of the blood, including the immune system's blood. Here's how it moves. It moves from this original cell into these other things that we talked about and how they start flowing through your body. Where were those cells made? Bone marrow, right, in the bone marrow. So the key thing to get you to remember is that these cells are being made in the bone marrow, and that's just for your blood. There's another type of stem cell called the mesenchymal stem cell, which I'm going to get to in a minute, and how that is going to make you. This is a little, it'll clear up in a second.
That's how I know.
Another word, pluripotent.
What is a stem cell? Well, a stem cell was named because it reminded early researchers of the branches of a tree. So a cell that can, one cell type that can become two different cell types and branch,
Get the remote.
like a stem of a tree, and so they're called stem cells. There are stem cells in you and me. If the human body is seen as this assembly of thousands of different kinds of cells, making all the thousands of branches of the tree, there are cells in you and I that can make the different kinds of blood cells. We have different kinds of white blood cells, T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. And all of these come from a master stem cell in our bone marrow, called the bone marrow stem cell. And it makes all the blood cells. And so many of you may know people who've had a bone marrow transplant to replace their blood cells with these stem cells that can make new blood for a particular patient. But the big revolution occurred in the late 1990s with the isolation of pluripotential stem cells. And what are those? Those are almost miraculous cells, in that these cells are at the base of the tree of human life. So they are able to replicate, expand in numbers, or to branch out and be directed into any of the different cell types of the human body. Some of us recognized in the early days that those could be immensely powerful. A platform technology.
Platform
For a
technology.
biotechnology company that can make new products. So the pluripotential stem cell could be expanded in numbers, in large bioreactors in the laboratory, and then pushed to make just heart muscle cells, or to make blood cells, or to make cartilage cells for arthritis, or brain cells for Parkinson's, and the list goes on and on. Also unique to the cells was the fact that
And the list goes on and on.
Wow.
So when I'm talking about the list going on and on is that they want to make a business out of it. And they want to make sure that you don't know how these things are being created, because they want to make a business out of it. It's happening in your body right now. Those stem cells are flowing through your body. It's looking at the quality of those muscle groups or those whatever body part you have, and it's deciding about the health of it, and it's making decisions. It's giving it chemical responders to decide what to do next. And it's happening right now for all of you. And it doesn't cost you anything. But there are things that you can do to enhance it, and there are things you're doing that are actually harming it. This is the cell renewal turnover range. Okay? This is telling you how long cells are, and this is fixed science. This is not questionable. This comes from the VNIT. So we're looking at, this is the cell type. This is how long it takes it to turn over. This is the BNID number that's regulated to show there is no doubt or question how long the average time is for a cell. Your stomach intestine cell, 2 to 4 days. For the stomach lining, 2 to 9 days. Your blood neutrophils, 1 to 5 days. The white blood cell, 2 to 5 days. The gastrointestinal crypt cells. I told you in the crypt cells go down, the villus cells go up. And so these two different things are taking place. That's 3 to 5 days. The cervix, 6 days. Your lung alveoli, the things that draw the oxygen in when you breathe, 8 days. That's how long it lasts, and then it dies. 8 days, then it's replaced. Taste buds, your bone osteoclast and the osteoblasts, we'll get into that in a little bit. Your trachea, red blood cells we talked about, your liver, your fat cells. This is unfortunately the fat cells last 8 years. We'll talk about fat cells in a minute. There are 5 types of fat cells. So fat can be very good for you. So there's white fat cells, there's brown fat cells, there's yellow fat cells, there's beige fat cells, and there's something called mesenchymal fat cells, adipose tissues. So they have different functions. Some of them are designed to create heat in your body, which is very good. Some of them are designed to protect you. Some are designed to go into the skin layer to protect the skin. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So fat is not a bad thing, but it is kind of interesting that fat does a couple of things. Not only is it outside of your body in different places, and the different colors of it, and that could be a whole other talk of how much the fat works. But on two ends of the spectrum, an anorexic person has more fat in their bone marrow than an obese person, although it's very close. So fat, because it can be used, you can actually get stem cells from that fat, which aren't as good as the ones that are in your bone. But you also, they can be produced into something else, and you get other things from the fat. The reason they found out about these anorexic fat being in the anorexic people is they looked at deers that were starving. So deers that starved to death, they did autopsies and they looked and they said, wow, they have more fat in their marrow than the healthy ones do. So something happens when you are very, very thin, or the body says we better start storing stuff at the inner part of our body. There's something on the other end when you're a tad bit obese, it says we don't have a place to put it, let's put it back in there. Now the problem is when you have that in there, both of them are going to get then some form of osteopenia or osteoporosis, because the bone is going to get weak. Because the relationship between bone growing, which is the osteoblast, and the bone resorbing, the osteoclast, are being interfered with because of those fat cells inside. One is happening more than the other. So the reabsorption is trying to take place more than the creation of the new one. They have to be balanced in order to have a good, strong bone mass. And that's not taking place. Now, this is what we're looking at right now. So your whole skeleton will be replaced in 10 years. 10% per year. The whole skeletal system. Eye lens cells, they say lifetime, and gametocytes are saying lifetime. The central nervous system, they said lifetime, but that's being proven wrong too. So that information, although I cannot say anything other than what's officially from this BNID number, I can tell you factually, every person in the world will agree this is proven correct. The other ones are still in the investigation stage, but we have direct evidence. Okay, so I told you about the inward-downward pressure on the flat bones. The key to regulating it is that bones, you have to have gentle movement. Too hard or too tight cells harm both the delivery of blood, and it becomes we'll talk about the surface itself. So stiffness is not your friend. And the Chinese had an old saying that said, the way of life is soft and supple. The way of death is hard and brittle. They said, just look. So soft doesn't mean weak. So we have in our head that soft is weak. But if you look at soft as being firm, but not overly bound, it's going to react differently. So too hard things create havoc in the body, right amount of balance between how can I get this to be loose enough to get the blood to flow through it and to deliver the things it needs in order for it to regenerate again. Now, this next guy, this will become clear in a second. Wonderful technology.
Richard, Dr. West, is he one of the FLCCC guys?
Which
His name sounds familiar. Dr. West?
Yes.
He is, yeah.
Okay, this is Dr. Engberg. You notice he's just one of these folks from Harvard, Yale. This is one from a Stellar Review Biology. Okay?
My name's Don Ingber. I'm a senior author.
Is it able to go up at all, the volume?
article that.
Someone can go in the other room and get the,
The role of mechanical forces.
ask them if they can give you the
Remote.
remote.
Go see if I can
Oh, I know where it is, okay.
I knew you'd know that.
Pause it.
Okay, I'm gonna pause it, what he's just gonna introduction.
Where they going?
Okay,
Hey, Richard, see if
Okay.
that door is open right
And
there.
I tried it.
Is it locked?
Is it right
So-
behind, on that shelf? behind-
what he's saying is that it's very unusual for at a cell regeneration, a biology lecture to talk about mechanical forces. And he's gonna tell you why he's talking about these mechanical forces, because it's those mechanical forces that are the key element to disease and regeneration without disease. So we're told that disease comes from, you had bad genes, right? We're gonna tell you exactly how those genes transcribe because you are not creating the proper mechanical force on those genes. And I'll give you a list that they've shown to prove that they come from that. This is groundbreaking stuff because we've been programmed to believe everything's in the DNA, everything's in the drug, everything's in the, if you can make it go higher? I don't know if you want to use it.
I don't know how to, do you know how to do
Well, it would save volume.
I
I can't read that.
Sometimes you can use the speaker on your
What's
laptop
that?
too.
Oh.
and turn
Yeah, I
it
have the speaker up as high as I can on my laptop, so. All right, so he's gonna tell you, and you're gonna see things here, so.
My lab is worked for 35 years or more on the key role of mechanical forces.
Is your computer all the way up?
No, really effectively, in a nutshell, is
Still
that
pretty quiet.
mechanical forces are as important for
Here,
control of
yeah.
cell and tissue and organ development as chemical disease. And so we feel like this review, which we tried to make as expansive as possible, provides a new perspective on how cells are regulated by physical cues from the environment. These are forces like shear stresses in blood vessels, blood pressure, but also when you move your arms or stretch your skin and your muscles, or gravity on bone and cartilage. But also down at the microscopic level, the forces that cells generate inside their cytoskeleton, the molecular frame within the cell, those are equally important in regulating cell and tissue behaviors. So all cells have this cytoskeletal framework which contains actin myosin filaments, which are the same actin myosin filaments that we all have in our muscles when we contract our muscles. And when cells contract, they pull on their adhesions to other cells and to the extracellular matrix on which they adhere. That's the in vivo anchoring scaffold. I like to think of it as an egg carton, which the cells sit like eggs.
I'll show you pictures in a bit.
Matrix orients the cells and provides basically a scaffold for their orderly renewal and repair. And so in this article, we actually start at the beginning of development, from fertilization of the egg all the way through the divisions of the cells in the early embryo to the formation of the first tissues and organs, to the morphogenesis, the generation of form of the particular tissues and organs, and then how tissue architecture is maintained throughout adult life, and how mechanical forces actually govern some of the major control points at all of those stages, and then how when the mechanical sensing and transduction systems, we call it mechanotransduction, how mechanical signals are converted to a chemical response, how that system sometimes can become deregulated, you actually can get disease. Examples of mechanical forces in development. We've done work in our lab recently where we found, for example, that the formation of a whole organ, in this case a tooth, you don't think of it as an organ, but a tooth actually has different tissues within it that interface, lining cells called epithelial cells, and then mesenchymal connective tissue cells, fibroblasts-like cells on the opposite sides, that start out as a simple bud off the lining epithelium in the mouth, in the embryo, and then this bud buds out, so there's a little, the
bud sticking out, and then it buds in on itself, so it forms two little fingers downward, which are the roots. And that's all of morphogenesis in that tooth. Blood vessels come in, nerves come in, the epithelium differentiates into the hard enamel and dentin of the outer covering of the tooth. And for 20 years, people have been working out all of the genes and the morphogens, the chemicals and factors that regulate the steps that go from that initial bud to a tooth. And no one really understands how it works. And what we found, and this is just one example, is that the cells that are on the upper layer, the epithelium, the lining cells, put out two different factors. One, induce cells to migrate towards the matrix on which they sit. So the cells beneath are induced to migrate upwards towards the epithelium. And that's in a very general gradient. So cells all the way in the distance are starting to march towards it. And at the same time, the same cells produce out a factor that's a repulsive factor that basically tells the cells that are coming close to turn away. And this causes the cells to compact, to crowd together. It's called mesenchymal condensation. And this is known for probably 50, 100 years, that there's a mesenchymal condensation as a first step before most organs form. And in fact, the shape and size of that condensation can affect organ size and shape. And what we found is that physical compaction, the compression of cells tightly packed, is enough to trigger the transcription factors that induce all of the differentiation steps of the tooth. And you can actually take this undifferentiated connective tissue cells and physically switch them between two pieces of rubber, and they can then be induced to go all into a tooth when combined with the epithelium. So that's a case where all the genes and chemicals that people mapped out are indeed correct, but the genes encode for these motility factors, which then manifest their activity, their form-inducing or organ generation-inducing activity, through inducing a physical change in the microenvironment. And then once the cells experience that, you don't need the factors anymore.
So the key thing here, that I hope you're hearing that, is that it was the physical pressure that created the ability for it to transcribe, not the gene. The gene had to go into something, so the gene is holding the information, but it's the physical substrate that was on that made the tooth grow, and they did it outside of a body. Chinese use this thing because that's what I started this about, because they talked about the yin and the yang. So yin is inward, downward condensing, yang is outward and expanding. So the yin and the yang is what he just said. We have forces coming up, we have forces coming down. Those forces are creating certain things that are going to create parts in your body. So somehow 2,500 years ago they knew this, but also 2,500 years ago they said the key to humans is something they said are the three treasures. The first treasure they said is Jing. The second treasure is the Qi. The third treasure is your Shen. Jing, Qi, and Shen. The Jing, they said, is mostly translated as essence. You can't, they said your mom and dad gave you your Jing, your prenatal Jing. And then you add to that when you eat food. But that's your original essence. And I'll talk about that later, but I firmly believe, as well as others, that the Jing is the stem cell. And they knew about it 2,500 years ago. And they knew it was in the bone marrow. They said it was in the bone marrow. They said it was in the, regulated by the kidney, which I said, which is what produces that erythropoietin. That word. Erythropoietin, yes. That has to be the regulator for releasing of the Jing, which is going to be releasing of the stem cell to create the new blood or the new stem cell itself. A little saying that says, he who knows the mother will thereby know the offspring. And he who knows the offspring will greater understand the mother. Concept that they said something existed before heaven and earth. They don't know what it was. And they said, we don't know what it is. We'll just say it's awesome. And so they said, we'll say it's great. And we know it seems to work in these factors. And that's the beginning of Taoist concepts. And all Chinese medicine is based off of these concepts. This is the three substrates I mentioned earlier. So this is a light, very loose physical plane. This is a medium-sized one, and that's a heavy one. Just putting the stem cell on those three different structures, it differentiated into either a neuron, a muscle group, or a bone. Nothing else. No other force other than sitting on that structure. It was enough for it to read the hardness of the substrate to make it differentiate into these three different things.
What is the substrates? What
It
are
could
the
be
sub-
anything. They used heavy rubber meshes, but it could be anything. It could be your tooth lining. It could be your, again, the
So
bone
you're saying
itself.
The stem cell sits on a substrate?
I'm saying that they demonstrated that just putting a stem cell on any substrate,
Oh, okay.
the
And then it
physical
created a neuron, a muscle, or
bone,
both.
all by itself, because it just sat on
And the
that.
substrate was different density,
Correct.
Okay.
Different density in all three of those
light,
substrates.
medium, and
Light, medium, and heavy, and it created three different things.
And the force being basically just gravity?
Yes, the gravity of pressure coming down and the other gravity of the substrate coming up. And that was it. All right, now, when we do have this thing that takes place, this is about neurons, so I'll jump to neurons really quickly here. It may take 21 days for you to get the nerves to go online, so to speak. You can create them, so we know the synaptic connection can be made, but for it to talk to all the other cells and to be kind of integrated, it takes time for that to happen. So at least in this one indication, they said, this is what we believe the normal time would be, 21 days. All right, get to this exercise thing, all right? So, any exercise is better than no exercise, okay? But some exercises are better than others. If you did 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week, it shows that you would reduce all-cause mortality by 50%.
Wow.
All-cause mortality by 50%. And that's not even doing what I think are more efficient exercises. So if we look at running, so remember I talked about where those new cells are being formed?
Flat bones.
The flat bones. I'm doing swimming. Is there any much pressure on those flat bones? Not much. I'm lifting a dumbbell, doing a curl. Any
None.
pressure on the flat bone? Leg press, a little bit on the hip. You're pulling up a little bit. So the reason I'm showing you this is because we know any exercise will decrease your chance of all-cause mortality by 50% if it's at a minimum of 150 minutes a week, which really would come down to 21 minutes a day. And that could just be walking and moving your arms a little bit to get some pressure there. The other thing it could be is simply doing a wall push-up. Simply going to the wall 2 or 3 times a day and doing 10 or 15 of them. If you could do more, that would be better. Weightlifting and stuff like that, the lat pull doesn't do very much. Some bench presses might, because they'll get the pressure on there. But we'll also then talk about ROS and RNS, which is the free radical production. So free radical production, high aerobic activity increases free radical production because you have a free electron floating in there looking for something that's going to lead to havoc in your body. So you have to balance the oxidative stress that's being maintained with the something like superoxide dismutase. So Qigong and Tai Chi, by the way, makes huge amounts of superoxide dismutase, huge amounts. And it's exercises that are designed to have inward downward pressure on those flat bones. Yoga is more popular now than ever before. Yoga has its benefits, particularly if you do the harder ones, which people don't like doing anymore. The downward dog, the planks, the plow, stuff like that. That's going to put the pressure on those flat bones. If I just do stretching, it's not going to do very much. And I'm gonna talk about some things in a few minutes when we get into the lymphatic system. Because stretching doesn't necessarily move the lymph fluid properly. Lymph fluid, and I'll talk about how that moves in a minute, particularly how it needs to be activated more on the left side. 2,500 years ago, the Chinese knew that their forms are more left side oriented because well, I'll touch on in a few seconds, I'll show you this, but when we get into the lymphs, your lymphs from your legs come into the cisternocoli here, and then it comes to the left side of your body, and all that lymph fluid drains into the left vein. The right side of your body only uses this short part of your body and the right arm, and that empties into the right vein. So the more activity you do on the left side is going to be draining those lymphatic fluids at a greater level. And the Tai Chi forms are always done, we do more left than we do right, because somehow they knew that 2,500 years ago. Okay, this is an article called The Active Grandparents Hypothesis, Physical Activity and Evolution of Extended Human Health Spans. This is those numbers we talked about. 150 minutes a week of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic will lead to that decrease of all-cause mortality by 50%. By the way, did your doctor tell you that? Just was wondering. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about this thing called the extracellular matrix. So this is something that's happening underneath your body, and we're going to kind of jump in here in a second as soon as that comes up. And again, thank you for your patience. And again, the more knowledge you have, the easier you'll find out how you can make yourself healthier and stronger very quickly. And this is something that was filmed a long time ago. It's called Strolling Under the Skin. I'm going to jump to this part right here. This is filming one of the first times.
What we did was to introduce a cross-linking mesh-type architecture which included the microvacuoles on the armature. We then looked for the fractal distribution. The scientific approach and the graphic model pointed to the same apparent reality. There really was a sliding system with brilliant liquid lying between the vacuoles and an armature of collagen fibers. This confirmed what we had initially thought about the pulling and tugging going on between the vacuoles. Moreover, thanks to this
So the extracellular matrix, this is what your things look like from the skin going down into the bone and everything in between. So it has this fancy name called
we were able to confirm that not only the tendons were able to move independently from each other, entire organs could do likewise, so the system was common to the whole organism. It was then that we realized what we had discovered. This multi-microvacuolar collagen absorbing system was to be found everywhere in the body. This sliding tissue is to be found in every nook and cranny of our organism, in other tendons like the extensors, in the abdominal wall near the rectus abdominis muscle, in contact with the thorax near the latissimus dorsi muscle, in the retroconjunctival groove of the eye, and so on. Indeed, it would seem that this tissue serves to anchor the muscles and tendons and could even be their primary constituent material. Even structures not called upon to move as such, nerves and the periosteum, are composed of this tissue fiber, but with differences in their arrangement and size. The mesoscopic framework of living matter required a more holistic view to be fully understood. So we began to look at the cutaneous and subcutaneous structures, which we thought we would find to be more stable in it.
Sorry for that breakup there. But this extracellular matrix is what gets stiff inside your body if you're not being soft and supple.
This mobile tissue environment. By its structure and its role of enclosing the other sensory organs, the skin is more than just an organ. It's a set of organs which is anatomically, physiologically, culturally, and psychically complex. Of all the senses, touch is the most fundamental. You can survive without smelling, seeing, or tasting, but not without touching. The skin permanently relays information. It never shuts down, blocks up, or sleeps. It has an odor, a texture, it perspires, secretes, eliminates. It exchanges signals with the outside world. Thanks to the skin, the body's surface is as much a machine for communication as a protective barrier. It can change color, texture, and shape, and retains the vestiges of aggression, such as sunburn, scars, and disease. At birth, it is taught, ready for life. Then, little by little, it ages, gets wrinkled, folded, and sags. Whether in newborn babies, adolescents, or adults, the skin is never totally flat and smooth. Through the hairs on its surface, you can see pseudogeometric structures separated by strength lines, allowing movement in all dimensions of space. These triangular pyramidal structures move in relation with each other. With any movement, they immediately align themselves with the traction. Their former position disappears, and a new shape is adopted. Then, as if by memory, they return to their initial position. With every single daily gesture, be it a caress or a fall, the skin undergoes this form of translation, traction, and stretching. Yet, with the exception of open wounds, it returns to its initial position. Of course, this movement has been known since time immemorial. It's called elasticity. But the question is, how is this elasticity linked to the subcutaneous structures? With the aid of a video endoscope, we began to stroll around under the skin to try to understand this apparently simple word of sliding, mobility, and smooth, slippery surfaces. We wanted to find out how it could accomplish both fast, sometimes violent movements, and gentle, minute ones without the slightest jerkiness. Dissect with a surgical blade, and what do you see? Just a wealth of tissue connections, a histological continuum, without any clear separations between the skin, the dermis, the hypodermis, the vessels, the aponeurosis, and the muscles. How is it then that this can all move so smoothly, and how can sliding come about?
Okay, we're going to go into more of it, but I just want to show you what it physically looked like. That these things move from your skin all the way down into the bone and everything in between. So the blood and the blood supply is going through it. This is a more modern view of that same thing. That film is over 30 years old, that film I just showed you. But it's the best one that's out there still. You'd think we'd have a whole bunch of them now, but there might be something happening they don't want you to know about this stuff. So this is the cell, this is the extracellular matrix. And this was just from 3 years ago, that film was taken from that fellow that I was talking earlier, Ingrid. He's the one that did this. Now, the Bailiff, we're going to talk about in a few minutes. He did something remarkable that we mentioned. Go into this. So this is the guy who, this is Kaplan. This is the guy who proved that the stem cells are real and they exist. And he gave them this name, Ezekiel stem cells. This is
It's just extracellular matrix filled with growth factors and cytokines, because collagen binds all of those goodies.
Okay, so this is a lecture he gave, and he's talking about how regeneration of limbs in salamanders, and he says, and humans. So he's going to show you how a person lopped off their finger and how it regrew, complete with nail bed.
And he then pulverizes that, and when somebody amputates off a finger, he sprinkles every day a little bit of this fairy dust on it, changes the bandage, and what you see is the following, is that this gentleman who amputated off his fingertip has a perfect regenerative, including the nail bed. And there's a literature in England of kids below the age of 5 of guillotining off not only the tips of their fingers, but the first and second joints. Now, everyone in the room would say, oh, you can't regenerate that. These kids perfectly regenerated the whole finger, including the 2 joints. And the trick was, they were in rural England, and they weren't near an urgent care center, and nobody threw a stitch through it. So Kaplan rule number 1 is, if you want regeneration, keep the sutures away. Second is, you can stop the bleeding with a compress. That's the first thing that Aristotle taught us a couple thousand years ago. You get a massive bleed, let it clot, and put a clean cloth. We would call those rags on it, and that's what the parents of these kids did, and got full finger regeneration. So if you think this is some bizarre single thing, of course, you're all very sophisticated. You all have really good cell phones. So Google, as I did, Google finger regeneration, and you get 400 pictures of people holding up fingers that got guillotined off, and they regenerated their fingertips. So again, the real issue here is how to organize your capacity to regenerate tissues, including fingertips, which you would have said and did say you couldn't do. So now I'm going to end quickly. And this is Diego Correa and Rodrigo Somoza. And the 3 of us did a poster for Nature. And the website for that is, you can download this poster. It has all of the newest information about MSCs. And we've tried to, we only, of course, recognize the progenitors of MSCs as being parasites. Any other cell is not of interest, as you might imagine. And hidden in this poster is one small panel, which affects all of the research that's going on at this place, because this is the universal stem cell niche that I told you is in every single tissue in your body.
Okay, so I'm not gonna. The key thing is that he had this showing you that even a finger can be changed. Okay.
So he said he sprinkled fairy dust on it.
What he meant, what he was saying earlier is that they took actually epithelium from a pig's bladder,
okay,
to use that as the medium, and then he made a powder out of that.
right.
And then that powder, then he made a company, that guy did, that they let, and he then used that to put on the bandage every 3 or 4 days,
Right.
to give it a medium for it to grow in.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's how it was. The stem cell was inside the person, but the medium for it to grow in was that thing that was on there. He said the stitch, the suture, is going to harm you, because that will stop that regeneration from growing.
What is this guy's name? David?
His name is Balak, and I'll get to him. And this other guy is the first one. Kaplak was the person who founded stem cells in the first place. He was giving a lecture, but he was talking about the other man, Balak, who actually made this thing out of the pig's intestines.
So he said the boy in the rural area, since they were not near doctors, basically was it just compression that held?
Yes, just compression held it together. But the difference is, he said under 5. Remember that first slide I showed you? Where were all those red blood cells being made? And those cells? The whole body. We only have the ribs, the sternum, the scapula, and the hip. So we don't have as much as they do, because we're not making as much as they do. And plus, we're not actually putting that downward pressure as much as they do. But that made big headlines, because he was making this stuff. So what did the news media say about this? Junk science. And they got a surgeon. No conflict of interest there. Got a surgeon that said, this is junk science. It can't happen. You can't regrow this back. And look at the date on that. It says 2008. This story, that's 2010. She was running in her house, and the door slammed behind her, and she lopped off the tip of her finger. She said, oh my God, her husband grabbed the finger, actually put it in a baggie. They had this was in California. She goes to the hospital in California, and they said, oh, we're going to have to amputate the rest of it because we can't do anything about it. She said, but I got the finger. Can't you sew it back on? They said, no, we can't sew that back on. He said, we have to amputate the rest of it. She said, I don't want that to happen. And she went home. She said, let me think about it. Now, they were pressuring her. You have to have this done now. She said, it doesn't feel right. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go think about it. I can come back. You're going to lop it off anyway. You've covered it. I'm safe now. I'm safe for the moment. So she went home and she did some research and she contacted the guy who made the fairy dust. And she said, hey, does this stuff really work? And he says, yes, it really works. It's a company called, I believe it's called Axios. This company is. That doctor was so nice that he contacted her doctor in Los Angeles and said, look, I can send this to you. He did. 6 months later, she regrew it completely, including the nail bed. So I'm telling you, folks, this is real. Now, there's an industry out there that wants you to go to them. Now, that fairy dust thing is good because otherwise you don't know what's going to happen. It's going to help it. But there could be things that are helping you in lots of ways. But if you're not mopping off your finger, you could be simply doing those exercises that creates the inward downward pressure on those flat bones.
Just personal anecdote, my younger brother did that with his finger at a door. I was probably 6 or 7, so he would have been about 4 maybe. Lost about this much off the tip of his finger when the door slammed. And you know, you can't tell the difference. I mean, it looked a little funky for years, but it all grew back.
They just put a rapid pressure on it.
Yeah. I was 7.
Right. Your mom
How
probably
much?
bandaged.
I think she did try and put the end in a bag of ice and go to the doctor or something, but they didn't sew it back on.
Right.
And it's pretty much I haven't. You don't notice it when you look at it.
Yep.
But so personal anecdote.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's real, it does happen, but remember, what's happening now, you just replaced more blood cells. Right now, you just possibly had an alveoli cell die. A liver cell just went to hell. So you got to think about circulation and how do you think you're going to be regenerating that. Okay?
So then, Richard, all this shit they tell you about with your bone scan, and you're like, my bones are going to be so brittle that, you can breathe on me and my bones will break. That's all. I mean, you could get that bone straightened back.
You can get bone straightened back, yes. Inward, downward pressure on the flat bones. I guarantee you'll get bone strength back and bone density back within 3 months. 3 months. Someone said to me the other day, oh, that won't happen for the brain. Brain can't regrow. What does that say? Where is that from? Published in 2020. Must have been one of those conspiracy theory sites that
it's Jerry Springer.
Some fake news that's taken place there. It's in a journal of stroke, showing you how this process works. But some things are taking place for this neurogenesis. Once it happens, there's things that go around that area to try to figure out what it is. But if you did stimulation up there, so remember neurons, everybody said that substrate where nerves will grow if it's on the light surface. So like a light effleurage on literally where that damaged area would actually increase the ability for those nerves to grow. Also electrical stimulation. So a little bit of electroacupuncture or something like that would actually increase and enhance this neurogenesis. This is what it looks like. So this is just pictures of what that neurogenesis would look like. So what the glial cell is over on the side, what literally takes place with this angiogenesis. Kind of give you, some visuals of what's happening. Okay. The birth of new neurons is induced in response to the stroke. It surrounds the area. When it does that, these particular repair processes take place. The key thing is that there's certain things that happen in the site of the injury. Now we're going to get into the lymph system for a minute, because the lymph is really, really important. Sorry about that. Sometimes these things are supposed to jump to certain areas and it doesn't listen to me. So your lymph system, you're going to see a picture of a lymph system here.
Lymphatic system. And in the first video here, we're just going to introduce the various components of the lymphatic system. And so the first thing,
sorry, I want to give you a bigger picture there and it's not coming out.
okay, so what is lymph? Lymph is the fluid that's transported in lymphatic vessels. Now lymphatic vessels, which we'll talk about in a little more detail in later videos, are very similar to arteries and veins, except they don't carry blood. So all of these strings, these green strings that you see in the legs right here, and they're of course elsewhere, but these are lymphatic vessels. Okay? When we typically draw them, we draw them green, even though they're not green in real life. Arteries are red, veins are typically blue, nerves are yellow. Lymphatic vessels and most lymph structures are green. So these are our lymphatic vessels, and they carry a substance called lymph. Okay? And lymph is a milky fluid, similar to blood, but it contains a lot of proteins, excess fluid that has been filtered into the interstitial area, and then pathogens from tissues and the interstitium. Okay? So let's recall in blood vessel physiology, when you go to the capillary bed, and we'll talk about this more in a separate video. Here's a capillary bed. Here's an arteriole feeding the capillary bed. Here's the venule draining it. And then, of course, we have the arterial end of the capillary and the venous end of the capillary. And remember that at the arterial end of the capillary, there's a greater hydrostatic blood pressure. There's a lower hydrostatic blood pressure on the venous end. And so what that causes is on the arterial end of the capillary bed, we have net filtration, which, remember, filtration is the bulk flow of fluid and other particles, but mainly we're concerned about the fluid, from the inside of these vessels that are capillaries into the interstitium, which is another term for the interstitial fluid. Now, out of the fluid that is filtered out into the interstitial areas out here, only about 85% of it is reabsorbed on the venous end of the capillary bed. Because remember, at the venous end, because the hydrostatic pressure is lower, you actually have a different process. You actually have reabsorption that occurs. And so fluid will move from the interstitium into the capillaries. But it's not a 100% efficient process. Only about 85% of that fluid that's filtered is reabsorbed. And so the question is, what happens to the other 15% that's not reabsorbed? Well, it turns out those are going to be reabsorbed via lymphatic capillaries. And we'll talk more about how these capillaries eventually form vessels in one of the future videos. But for now, understand that that fluid that gets reabsorbed into the lymphatic vessels ultimately has to make its way back into the venous system. And so they're going to travel up these lymphatic vessels, and they're going to encounter other structures called lymph nodes, which we'll talk about, and ultimately get that fluid back into the venous system. Okay, so the lymphatic system is very important for, we'll look at this right now, fluid return to the blood. That's one major function of the lymphatic system. Fluid return to the blood that gets filtered but not reabsorbed by the capillaries. Okay? Another important thing about lymph is that because it's draining fluid from the interstitium, it might also pick up pathogens that have managed to find their way into the interstitial regions, right? So the lymphatic system has another function, and that is mounting an immune response. And we're going to talk about that with respect to lymph nodes. So if we take a little zoom in right here, let's look at one of these legs. We can follow any one of these lymphatic vessels up, and eventually they're going to converge at these round structures that we see throughout the body. And they tend to be clustered in certain areas. For example, we have some popliteal ones around the knee region. We have some inguinal ones right here. There's some of the axillary regions, some of the cervical regions up here. These are called lymph nodes. And we're going to talk about lymph nodes more in the next video, but it suffices to say for now that the fluid that's moving in these lymphatic vessels is eventually going to make its way to a lymph node, okay? And the cool thing about lymph nodes is that they house white blood cells for immune responses. In fact, any one of these lymphatic organs that we're going to talk about that houses white blood cells for the purpose of mounting an immune response is termed a secondary lymphatic organ, okay? Now, the lymph nodes, as I mentioned, collect lymph from converging lymphatic vessels, and there are white blood cells just waiting there. And they're waiting to mount an immune response against any pathogens that might be present in that lymph.
Okay. So the importance of the lymph obviously is very high, and those nodes are collecting these pathogens. And I want to do a brief demonstration here. So I had a person come to my class, in Tai Chi and Qigong, we're always bending our knees. And the reason we're bending our knees, making them go up and down, is to milk these popliteal glands in the knee. And I had a person that said, my chiropractor told me there's no lymphs in your knee. I said, find a different chiropractor. Because I guarantee you, these nodes are there. And I work with people all the time, and most of the time when I check someone, I check their left part of their neck, because that's usually swollen, where, this in a minute, we'll talk about that, that part where these all drain above the belly button, and then the left side, all of this goes to only the left side and empties into the left vein. Only this portion and the right arm goes into the right vein. So the dumping out into the fluid into the blood properly is having heavily on the left side. Now the thing about lymphs is, I brought this in, I actually had a bucket that I was bringing earlier, and I didn't want to get you all wet. But let's say I do an exercise that, this is a lymph, it's got fluid in it, and I just stretch it and bring it back to its original shape. Will the fluid in there do anything? But if I squeeze this, what happens to the fluid that was there? It gets pushed up. So in these lymphs, you have check flow valves or backflow valves that the only way the lymph can move is for muscular contraction to take place. Without muscular contraction, it can't drain. So most people have swelling in the back of their knee. It's giant swelling. It's just lymphs that are totally, completely filled with lymphatic fluids. And who knows what the hell is in there, because it's full of toxins. The body had pulled it out, and it's laying in there. Same thing in other places, particularly in the neck is the biggest ones that respond to. So if it gets up into the cisterna coli here, then I got to get it from here up to here. So think about what type of exercise you do that moves something from just below your, above your belly button to get it to come up to here. So
Inversion.
Inversion sometimes would work. Inversion would work great. Standing on your head. Undulations would. Breathing. Breathing creates.
No, rebounder.
Rebounders can a little bit, but the pressure isn't going to be. The rebounder is just going to go like that, right?
Well, you're jiggling the whole system.
It's going like this. See, it's not going like this. It's not squeezing. Sit-ups would. Breathing creates a little bit of pressure there in this. There's this internal pressure that's made there.
Deep forward bends.
Deep forward bends, yeah, something like that. Leaning forward, yeah.
The cobra pose?
The cobra pose, yeah. A lot of those poses are very good to move it, but if I got to get it from here to here, so I got to do some milking things to get it up to here. So again, because now Tai Chi and yoga are very popular, Tai Chi guarantees you it. Yoga would if they get the milking of the legs, particularly behind the knee and the inguinal crease. Just stretching, if I do a simple stretch, I ain't getting that milking.
So a downward dog would do that.
Downward dog would do very good for the back. I said particularly but again, downward dog, you lock your legs oftentimes. The key is you don't want to have the legs totally locked. You want to go from leg loose to up and down to get that contraction of the muscle. Sorry, this is This is supposed to jump for me, and sometimes it doesn't, so I'm gonna quickly get to the next slide here. We're running out of time. Senescent cells. These are cells that are just walking around causing you trouble. They're cells that aren't doing anything. They resist removal. Apoptosis is normal cell death. So your cells are designed to only last so long, and it's designed to secrete certain enzymes so your body knows get rid of that. But these cells are sitting there and they don't do anything. And guess what body parts have most of these in them?
Legs.
Well,
Brain.
Well, brain to some degree, right? That's
Stomach,
where you get
belly.
senile, right? Fat cells have a lot of them in there, but also other places. They're found everywhere in the body. They're removed normally by the healthy immune system. So how is that going to be removed? You got to get the T cells, which are made where? In the bone marrow. You got to get the lymphs to pull them out, and you got to get the lymphs to drain it into by milking them to drain it out of your body. Cellular senescence is defined as a condition when cells no longer have the ability to proliferate. These cells resist the body's usual system of disposal, and they linger. And they excrete chemicals that spread inflammation and damage the neighboring normal cells. Fat cells, both cells, there's good cells and there's bad fat cells. Oxidative stress. So free radicals. I said certain exercises increase oxidative stress, some decrease it. So luckily, yoga doesn't increase oxidative stress. Okay, that's a good thing. And it actually does have some SODs, the superoxide dismutase. Tai Chi and Qigong, it makes a lot of them. And I can show you things comparing the two. Tai Chi's better. That's mine.
What about heart-brain coherence meditation?
Yes, well, meditation, we'll get into that again, the reason why. But we're talking about mechanical processes. So the physical squeezing and releasing is the key to do it. And then those certain chemicals can be made as antioxidants to wash things, which is what that comes into play. But I still got to get it into the system to have it wash the cell and pull it out.
What about Pilates?
Yeah, Pilates would be another good one. Again, keep in the back of your head, just look at the places where you have to have inward downward pressure. Okay, substrate stiffness.
Pilates. Oh, yeah.
Promotes macrophage activation, enhances proximal proliferation, activated receptors. This is technical crap that says that if your extracellular matrix and your tissues are stiff, they're going to create chemicals in your body that are going to wreak havoc in it. So there are some ways, in Qigong we have things like, sometimes called iron shirt, or the pat forms, the Shaolin pat forms, where we literally pat the cells to excite them and to loosen up that and get rid of that stiffness. Now, a flabby cell can be stiff. If you want the cell to be soft, because the proper structure of the cell is what's going to give you that the denial of these protein factors that are causing you to have serious problems. Anti-aging is activated by pressure and movement. Our bodies are constantly changing and remodeling. New blood is being formed every minute. New T and B lymphocytes are produced every minute. Different forms of tension produce different cell types and the structures they sit on. Immunity is enhanced by movement and draining the lymphs. So you have to create the blood. You have the blood circulating to find out what's damage there is, and then try to find a way to get the bad parts out of your body. The Chinese again said the way of life is soft and supple, the way of death is hard and blunt. All right, the surgery was a success, but so many people have had body parts replaced, other things. This is an example of, I had recently damage to my rotator, on my tendon going into my shoulder. It's called a Popeye tendon rupture. I was lifting something very heavy and strong, and it jerked, and it ripped, detached here, and it rolled up into, it looks like Popeye. So that was about 6, 7 weeks ago. It's about 90% healed. Okay? No surgery, no anything, just constant movement to get it back. And I'm up to 30 push-ups every day now to put more weight on it. This is showing you that the failure rate was 39% in arthroscopic surgeries. Yet they said it was a success. So I looked those things up and they said, well, if you can raise your hand above 70 degrees, that's a success. Then they said even if anatomically it was not fixed, it was still considered a success.
Oh, shit.
Yes. I'm giving the sources. Anyway, I just want to let you know that just because you have something, then oftentimes then, for those of you who have put other body parts inside you because you're told to do it, because it's important, that you would never be healthy if you did it, your body's going to be looking at those parts. It's going to say, oh my God, what is this? You know, what is this? It's titanium, it's plastic, it's metal, it's lead. And so it's going to then, so what I'm suggesting to you, those of you who have that, you're going to have a good conversation with your body. And I'm not joking, this is the psychoneuroimmunology part. You're going to have to say, recognize this thing as being beneficial for me in this circumstance. Any other place, get rid of it. So it's going to be hard, but believe me, you can. The body is so friggin' smart, it remembers. But if you don't accept it, and so there's a little thing that I know that Anya teaches a lot about, how do you put yourself in a body part? How do you occupy space in your body?
Use your imagination.
I'll talk about imagination in a minute, but you can start with that. But how do you occupy it? Because when we have been traumatized, what the first thing we normally do is get the hell out of there. And so when a body is traumatized, we're no longer in there. We're not occupying the space consciously. The mind leads to chi, the blood follows the chi, is the maxim. Yi chi, Suzy yi. The mind leads to chi, the blood follows the chi. Now my mind is saying, don't go there, that's damage, go away from there, don't look at that. You got to make the mind go to those places. And when it goes there, then you have to have a conversation about it. And when I know when I've done things, it's like, I don't want to go there. Forget that. That hurts. That's painful. That's memory. Scary. That's all those other things. But that's scary. So all those things are there. And you have to find a way then to work through the psychoneurological aspect and say, okay, right now I'm safe. Right now in this moment I'm safe. I wasn't safe before. I want to occupy that space. So again, I want to do another talk in a couple, next month on the psychoneuroimmunological aspects of what this stuff is.
I was gonna, 3 things. Can we set a date today? Number 2, can I post this intellectual property of yours on our website so everyone could review it? And number 3, the bathroom at the very end of the hall going out the back door is unlocked, so you can all use it when we leave. Not all at once.
2 at a time, there's 2 stalls.
We're almost done. A few more things. So yes.
Pick a date in February. This is what?
The week after Valentine's week. So Valentine's Day is
Wednesday.
14th. Okay.
And that would be the 21st of February. Same time, 5:30.
Same time. Would that work for everyone? Again,
Yeah.
I think you would like it because this. So this is all mechanical, biological stuff. It's heady stuff. I showed this to my family the other day. They said, "My God, I can't see anymore. You've blown away my brain. I can't take anymore." And I said, "Well, I want you to know because I showed them. Look, you take a statin that has a whole list of side effects, including obesity, stroke. I mean, the rest of the world makes you sign a waiver saying you were told what these side effects are before they're allowed to give it to you. But we're being given to it like that. But anyway, this is a quick thing. We're almost done. We'll be done in about 7 minutes.
Whenever there is an injury or a challenge to an organ or tissue, a whole process of renewal takes place in the body to help restore optimal health. Soon after the injury, the affected tissue releases specific compounds that travel through the blood to the bone marrow. When the compounds released by the injured tissue reach the bone marrow, these messengers tell the stem cells in the bone marrow to divide and create new stem cells, which are then released from the bone marrow into the bloodstream. Slowly, the number of stem cells increases in the blood circulation. At the same time, the affected tissue releases another compound called stromal-derived factor 1, or SDF1, that attracts stem cells. As stem cells circulate in the fine blood vessels of the affected tissue and sense the presence of this compound, they stop in the blood flow and migrate into the tissue. Inside the tissue, stem cells slowly migrate to the very site of injury where SDF1 is being secreted. When they reach the site of the injury and come into contact with the damaged tissue, stem cells begin to multiply and then slowly transform into cells of that tissue. Through this process of amplification, one stem cell can become thousands of tissue cells.
Okay. Yeah, so getting to what we were told and what's real. You fall, you bang your knee, your elbow, your wrist, and it begins to swell. What's the first thing you're supposed to do? Ice on it. Please don't ever do that.
Elevate it.
Elevate it. If you put ice on it, the ice is designed to stop the inflammation and to deaden the cell. So ice will take away pain if you're experiencing pain, but it stops the process. So there's a 3-part process that is first inflammation, second proliferation, third regeneration. So this happens at every cell of the body that has cellular death or damage. It's first inflammation, second proliferation, and third regeneration.
And proliferation is the T cell.
Correct, that thing that's all gathering
Bone
around the
marrow going to the damaged site.
Exactly, it's going through damage. So the key thing is that if it doesn't hurt, don't ice it. Ice does reduce the blood flow, and ice does deaden the nerve. So if the nerve's dead, it's not going to be sending signals. So pain is part of that signal process of send stuff here to repair it. So the other day,
if it's slow in the blood, then your T cells aren't moving fast enough
correct.
to get to the...
Exactly. So you're literally doing the opposite, which is beneficial for your body. But again, why isn't every child taught this, and why aren't they telling you this everywhere? Because it's common sense when you know the process. The process is not, changed in any way on my part. Okay, this is more about the specifics of that. Don't worry, we'll jump to that. So why don't we live forever? Okay.
Because our body wears out.
So the cell is hindered by abnormal cell death, tissue stiffness, cell hypertrophy. They have cells enlarge when they're not properly fed the nutrients that they need. Cell increase or decreases the change of it, the hyperplasticity of it. Peripheral artery disease, this is decreased femoral blood flow. So when you have that, your cells also then having things growing on the wall of the cell itself, it's reducing the blood flow going to it. So you have fatty tissues that are basically in there, or lipids that are inside the arterial wall. Increased femoral fat in the osteoporotic bone. Remember I said that, told you earlier, the fat for both ends, the anorexic and the obese. Aerobic exercise and weightlifting. Aerobic exercises increases increases the heart rate, which is a very good thing, but it creates oxidative stress. So that oxidative stress, the ROS and the RNS, the nitrate stress, is a oxidant. So you have to balance that with an antioxidant. And when you don't, you're actually increasing the problems inside your body. High glycemic index foods. Talked about sugar earlier. You know, these are killers. Processed meats, bacon, sausage, ham, salami. Red meat can lead to these oxidations of cells. Reused cooking oil. Pollutants, simple pollutants. Like, we live in a wonderful town, it's a beautiful place, but sometimes there's lots of wood smoke out there. That wood smoke is, you breathing it in, that's going to be affecting it. It's a free radical, it's a free radical that's being introduced into your body. It's also talking about why your skin gets, the sagging of the skin is because excess things go into those skin, particularly pollutants in the air. So particulate matter enters the skin, and smoke is a big one that damages your skin cells themselves. Negative effects of inactivity: you decrease the erythropoietin, that thing that's going to make more blood, decrease red blood cells, increase oxidative stress, increased inflammation. All because you didn't want to walk for a few minutes. Okay? I'm serious. All you had to do is walk. Because that starts, remember, anything for 21 minutes a day is going to reduce your death by all-cause mortality by 50%. Now, if you added a few wall push-ups in there 3 times a day, those simple, easy wall push-ups to get that pressure on those flat bones, or if you did other things, those hip circles or different things, getting your hips going in different ways to get the pressure on those, you're going to have even longer longevity. Most medical schools only allow a perfunctory hour about the facts of physical activity. This isn't me saying it. This is from the British Journal of Sports Medicine. And that was 2009. And it hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse.
They got about an hour on addiction, too.
Yeah. Why has not organized medicine not declared an all-out war against physical inactivity? If we had a pill that confirmed all these confirmed health benefits of exercise, would we not do everything humanly possible to see it that everyone has access to this wonder drug?
Yeah.
Would it not be the most prescribed pill in the history of humankind? I think we all know the answer to these questions. We know that the immensely powerful pharmaceutical industry machine exists in the world at present, would see to it that everyone, if it was a pill, would get it. And they're making sure you don't know about it now.
Sell it.
These are the diseases that are caused by faulty mechanical stress. Can't zoom this in right now. Yeah, sorry about that. There's just so many of them. I mean, the list is so great. Cardiac disease, immunological diseases, different cancers, obesity, different things, stroke. You think, oh, that didn't happen. How could that be caused by a mechanical function? But it is. Pulmonary diseases, emphysema, your eye problems like glaucoma, chronic back pain, osteoporosis. These are proven to be caused by mismanagement of the physical force on the body, not the gene. Okay. Types of mechanotransduction therapy. Again, I didn't make this up. This came from Kaplan, who looked at what's taking place. He has acupuncture on there because we're getting into those different levels of that extracellular matrix. In addition to acupuncture is acupressure. In Chinese medicine, acupuncture was one tiny part of the medicine. Here in the States, we think it's the big thing. It's minor. The thing was Tuinan Anmo, which is the physical pressures at different levels to be able to create this aspect of it. I was trained in China on those techniques and methods, so I know how much pressure to put on to get different responses. Needling is not called acupuncture in China, it's called zenzao, which means needle and heat. It's not what we think it is. Herbs, again, herbs can help in some degree, but they're not the miracle thing you think, because if those other things aren't taking place, I can put all that good stuff into my body, but if I don't have the system utilizing it, it's not gonna work. So food and drugs isn't the answer. Exercise is the answer. Food is a supplement to that. You want it, drugs are a supplement to that, and hopefully they'll be some type of herbal supplement.
Why is Botox listed up there?
It's listed as a as what it does, it creates a physical change when you put it in your body. It creates mechanical structural change with the Botox being in your cells. That's why it's there. It's a mechanical force being applied to the cell.
So it's like creating that upward and downward movement.
Correct.
Right, but mechanically.
Mechanically.
Or chemically.
Correct. Okay, inward downward pressure on flat bones, exercise that moves into circulation, exercise that drains the lymphs, moderate exercise 21 minutes a day, exercise that keeps the joints open, it facilitates cartilage and synovial fluid remodeling. So if I'm not stretching those joints and getting them to open and close, I'm not going to get that cartilage to be properly replaced. Diet free of free radicals and high antioxidants, reduced exposure to toxins, and again, come to the next one, which is secondary immunology. Current focus is on genetic-based diseases. This is not me saying this. This comes again from Inger, who you heard talk a few minutes ago. That's these are experts in the field telling you this, not just me. I learned it from the Chinese. This is talk about the Jing. I talked about Jing, Qi, and Shen. That's telling you literally how Jing, as part of Chinese medicine, is the stem cell. So I told you 2,500 years ago the Chinese knew this. They understood it. They called it the essence, but they didn't call it a stem cell. They didn't have a word for it. They said something that's in your body, and the Jing is the key to make your body have reproduction. And lastly, regrowing a molar after extraction with an adult male 69 years of age.
Wow.
You can't see that so well. But I know this person really well.
I need to regrow.
I know this person really well, I can guarantee you. It's me. I had a couple of molars removed in my ears because it listens to what the dentist said. And they always stitched them. He said, oh, the Lazal. Well, I had a tooth that was cracked 1977 from a car accident. It was cracked, a vertical crack. Well, finally it got to be where there's I started getting infection in there, and he said, well, this has to come out. I said, okay, you can take it out. He did. No sutures. He said, just pack that in with some cotton swabs. You keep packing it a little bit. It'll be fine in a few days. And it was. Now, that's what's happening inside my body right now. I'm growing here and here a new tooth.
Oh, is the
Now-
white, is that
Now,
just is that enamel that we're seeing, or is that just a shine?
that's the actual tooth coming out right
Yeah,
here.
that's the enamel.
The enamel, right
Right.
here. So he showed you about that pressure. Remember I told you Inger was telling you about how that force, if you put the two rubber things together, it would create a tooth? Well, the thing that I did do is I actually went outside and I whittled a twig. And I whittled a twig and I used that as, those of you who come to my classes, we do our knocking our teeth. We knock the teeth from back to front because we have dentin stem cells. We have stem cells literally in here. So knocking the teeth back to front creates a mechanical transduction to make sure these teeth are being properly aligned with proper stem cells to keep the teeth healthy. Well, I couldn't do it on this side because the tooth was gone, so I got a stick. And I started chomping down on the stick to give it the mechanical pressure. That pressure is starting to regrow. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'll keep you informed next time I meet you. But remember that lady I told you that chopped off her finger? It took her 6 months for it to grow back. So I'm not 6 years old anymore. I'll be 70 this July. So being an old fart, I have to find a way to get my body to regenerate in some way. It may take me 6 months. But I'll report back to you and let you know how it's going to do.
Are you using the pig stuff?
No.
Fairy dust?
I'm just using a stick, so I'm using a good piece of wood from the house next door.
From when you had it pulled and before you started using the stick, how many weeks or months is that?
That was in September,
Okay.
so that's 4 months. 4 months, yes.
Well, a lot of the dentists would say, oh, do some sort of grafting on it, that would mess it all up, right?
Correct, correct. Anyway, thank you all. I know we paid.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Hope you liked it. If you want to leave a donation, feel free to that donation box back there. Thank you, Wanda.
Amy, here's another one.
Richard, I have a question, maybe you can answer.
Yeah, Kate.
Was the conversation about SCF1?
Yes.
Was that a beneficial thing where it returns to the injured tissue?
Correct.
That is, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, by taking them with the recording them.
Stromal derived cell, right. That's a beneficial thing.
Thank you.
I was that.